I think you want to avoid the situation where the cybersecurity is a bolt-on afterthought, even with legacy systems, and you have to do it in a manner that's cost-effective.
Hey Space Watchers, and welcome to Space Cafe Radio, recorded here live at the SmallSat Europe. And I'm with Roger Patrick, the Director of Sales and Business Development at TERMA. Roger, how are you doing today?
It's fine. Quite busy. The right people here to try and sell things to. I'm happy.
Roger, 30 seconds. So where does TERMA sit in the space domain today? Because the cybersecurity conversation we are about to have only makes sense if people understand you're inside the operational chain, not pitching from the outside in.
We're, I would say, right at the core of it in that we make satellite control systems and satellite test systems. We have to integrate with other people's infrastructure, be they satellite manufacturers or satellite operators, where there are a high level of increasing security requirements coming in. So for the bulk of the software products that we sell, cybersecurity is becoming an important, if not one of the most important drivers of our future investments.
Let me start with the obvious one. What is currently most underestimated cyber risk in LEO constellations from your point of view?
LEO constellations generally require quite a lot of assets, not just the assets in space, but the assets on the ground. And a system is, as with any system, only as strong as its weakest link. And the problem is that on the ground is where the weaknesses could be. People talk a lot about satellite jamming, signal spoofing, which are real threats. But the real one is the terrestrial infrastructure, which has a lot of software in it and is an easy target for malicious activities. For instance, you don't have to break the spacecraft encryption to do serious damage. You can pollute a software delivery chain, you can abuse user access rights, and a number of other things, which are very similar to the threats on other terrestrial systems. But this is where I think the weakness is today, because it's quite a broad area, because an operator is using many different ground assets and they have to go through them one by one saying, does this meet our security requirements?
So the assumption that the satellite is the asset and the ground is just plumbing, that is a dangerous one, isn't it?
Yes, because the plumbing gets you access to the satellite.
Let's talk about the other challenges nobody puts on slides. What do you see across customers that does not get the airtime it deserves?
I think you want to avoid the situation where the cybersecurity is a bolt-on afterthought. Even with, I don't want to call them legacy systems because they're old and out of life, but existing systems where cybersecurity wasn't a prime requirement. You have to try and do with them what you would do with a new system, which is retroactively put in secure by design or DevSecOps or zero trust architectures without totally disrupting what's already there. And you have to do it in a manner that's cost effective, because even with cybersecurity, there is a cost issue to it and they will not pay any price you want to do it.
On the regulatory side, NIS2 now formally includes space. So the German Space Safety and Security Strategy S4 is laid out. The EU Space Act is coming-ish. Are the operators ready, or are we about to find out that a lot of the EU businesses were built on assumptions the regulator is now going to retire?
There's always that risk because it's an evolving field. Increased standardization that things like the EU Space Act will bring in should help a lot. We already have some internal debates as to which standards should you claim you're qualified to, whether it's NIST or UK standards or German standards or whatever. So I think for a long time, the supply chain will be close to the required standards. But to really be at the standards, you really need the other side of it, which is the auditing, the certification. And at the moment, I know to get NIST certification is very difficult if you're not American. There are these practical hurdles to it, but I think everybody is very aware that there are regulations and one needs to stick very closely to those regulations. And without that, it's not worth doing the investment.
I'm quite sure, and then I'm leaning out quite far now out of the window, is that these regulations are not harmonized within Europe or globally. And so that means that you have to get the certification in each and every country you operate. Is that correct?
At the moment, we don't go for the certification. I'm not sure they actually offer the actual certification. They just have the published guidelines, and you get 2 or 3 different sets of guidelines, and you try and extract from that highly compliant core that was that. And that's what drives your work and your investment in these systems.
Let's move towards scalability versus security. An engineering question. How do you balance scalability and security and encryption and authentication across hundreds, even thousands of satellites? The bespoke and managed models does not survive a mega constellation.
No, you have to do the trade-off between operational efficiency and cryptographic assurance. Yeah. Again, because operational efficiency is a cost driver for once you enter the routine operations. It becomes even more difficult if your assets, your constellation has limited visibility or limited resources. So if you can play with those parameters, you can bring in more flexibility or less. But a practical strategy usually combines a layered security architecture, automated key management, lightweight cryptography, and zero trust networking principles. Solution combining all of those is going to help you a lot. And I have to bring in the term AI. AI can help you here with a lot of the automation that you need.
We will speak about zero trust in a second, but from the scaling point of view, or does scale itself become a risk? At a few hundred nodes, the probability that one is compromised at any given approach might be fairly certain. Does the architecture simply have to assume that?
I think you have to build in, using another term that's coming in, resilience as well. So if a ground station or something is compromised, you have to have an operational capacity that you can actually remove that ground station from your network or your environment and still have enough assets to do the job that has to be done. So yes, scaling on one sense does increase the risks simply because there are more of them. But on the other hand, it forces you to have a very consistent approach across multiple areas. Otherwise, your costs go up and you're buying yourself an enormous maintenance problem.
Coming back to zero trust in space, can you explain that for our audience, what zero trust in that context mean? And is that real?
First of all, I think it's moved from a recommendation to almost a must. What zero trust really is, when someone gets access to the system, the immediate assumption is, I need to re-authenticate. So it goes into a lot of re-authentication when you're doing it. It's also to do with how the data is managed. The term is called data at rest. Now, in our own systems, the engineer is very careful when he tells me, he says, don't claim we're 100% zero trust, because 100% zero trust is a utopian ideal. What we do have is all remote access into our satellite control systems is zero trust. So the people have to be re-authenticated when they log in. What we don't do yet is the data at rest, because then you also need the suppliers of your database management systems to also support data at rest. And that is not going to happen overnight, if ever. What you have to do is assess what really are the most effective areas where you can apply zero trust. And then couple that with some other methods like containerization is a good way of also introducing a level of security. So while zero trust is an important part, it's not the only part of the solution. So you need a mixture.
Where is the challenge in the implementation? Is it the technology? Is it the cost? Is it the skill set or the standard bodies?
I think it's pretty much all of those. You need the people who understand what threats are. You need really technologies that support what you're trying to do. For instance, we took a decision several years ago with these systems to move to a middleware called NATS, N-A-T-S. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I questioned the decision because it was not the popular middleware for these kind of systems. But it is inherently secure. It's a message passing system, and it allows these nice displays to show the different data of the satellite. But that seems to have been the right decision because it is inherently secure.
How much is the move forward to this new level of security a cultural challenge, a cultural problem? The days that people write their password on the backside of their keyboard are hopefully over. Security means a behavioral shift as well.
Yeah, I think that's, again, one of my points when I'm talking to the engineers. I say, how does this affect the user experience? And it does make it more awkward to get into the system. And you have to live with that. That's just life going forward. But once you're in, also you have concepts like the equivalent of need to know, that you're only given access to data that you should be given access to. You also need mechanisms by which, because people move on, that after a certain period of time, a user is automatically removed from the system because they've not been active for a couple of weeks or something like that. And so it's all these other factors which can be frustrating. If you've forgotten your password, you have to go through a procedure.
Losing your iPhone and half of your life is gone, yeah.
So I think with these things, it's just going to be more awkward and more annoying, and you just have to live with it.
You mentioned earlier on AI, and I want to pick up on that. AI on helping to maintain security is one side, but there's also the other side, the attack side, where also AI can be used to guess your password. How well are you prepared for that threat vectors?
I think if you have to maintain a secure environment, you can use AI to do your penetration tests to try and emulate what a malicious attack would be. And I think within TERMA, we have these things protecting the wider group. It's a facility problem where we have that kind of protection, but it's certainly a role that AI can play there. Yes, the bad people also use AI, but the advantage of using it there is you can run things automatically. You can have a suite of attacks and also do it in an efficient manner. You don't want 20 people there managing your system just against cyber. You can't afford it.
What about the space segment? Does the current CCSCS standards give a sufficient protection now and in the future when the other buzzword are using post-quantum systems?
That is very important. Our systems support the CCSCS SDLS standard, and within the standard, there is a recommended solution. So far, every project we've seen has used the recommended solution. It requires the right skills to understand what you're doing and a dialogue between us as the control system supplier and the satellite manufacturer as to what you actually do. But we've now got it flying in 6 or 7 missions. And what we do, which is more unusual, is we not only do the telecommand side, but we also do the telemetry side for the encryption. Now, going forward, quantum computing is the risk because the power of quantum computers can break encryption more quickly. And what I understood from our expert is that NIST have already identified 4 algorithms that should be quantum computing secure. That going forward seems to be the way that you'd have to focus on those algorithms that can't be broken.
But how do you deal with that? How is TERMA prepared for this time? Because speaking to the security and defense clients that are also on your client list, they're preparing, they have that in mind already. As you just post-quantum algorithms, and as you said, they identified where the threats might come from and work from there. So how do you deliver this demand to them? Because that's a race we're in on technology here again. And then having assets in space. Ground system might be not easier to handle, but having systems in space makes them ready with the software-defined satellites and whatever our technology we have. How to deal with that?
But I think you have to tackle it from just adhering to the standards in a way. We try to make a general product, so we're not tied to a specific satellite program or manufacturer. We rely on the manufacturers to implement the standards, and we can then mirror that on the ground.
Do we have sufficient standards, and are they followed?
What we do find is that occasionally you find someone trying to cut corners, and that's never going to work. You have to follow the standard.
Step back with me for a moment. The US has issued the executive order last year on space security. Europe is finalizing the Space Act. Germany, as mentioned, the strategy is on the table, and the 35 billion euros are on military space. All that depends on systems that work, systems not broken down by an actor we never see. Is the cybersecurity conversation keeping up with the geopolitical one, or are we building a strategy on a foundation we have not properly secured? Where do you see that in the global context?
I think it is keeping up. It's a very valid question to ask and to monitor. But I would say in the last couple of years, when we receive invitations to tender, we now get a bunch of security requirements with them, which some refer to more the facility you're working in. So are you as a supplier protected? And then they go through to the actual application. What are you doing in your application? Which mirrors the way cybersecurity should be implemented as a layered system. and the supply chain has to follow it. And the fact that you've got so many opportunities and such growth actually, I think, puts the pressure on more standardization, get the standardization and get the harmonized certification standards together as soon as possible.
So if one listener does one thing differently on Monday morning after listening our podcast on the weekend, may it be an operator, regulator, or an investor, what you want it to be in terms of cybersecurity?
There's two answers to that. One is think how AI can improve your productivity. Because this enormous growth we're seeing in the space industry, there aren't enough people coming out of college or whatever to match that growth. So we need the help from AI. That's across the board and also relevant in cybersecurity. And people who use AI are generally surprised and alarmed at how good it is. So that's a general answer to the question. But the other part is, how do I make sure that I think about security from day one? I'm thinking of a project, or I have to do my work today. How am I making what I'm making secure? So it's secure by design. It's all these mantras we have these days, DevSecOps, and not as an afterthought.
And I think one thing would be very important to mention, at least for me, is that the level of security we're talking here about is not just military, it's not just intelligence services, it's everyone who is using satellites, or everyone who is doing his science mission even in satellite, because the asset in space is a dangerous asset.
I think many people use the term mission critical, that it's cost a lot of money to get that asset up there and you need to protect it. As you rightly say, this isn't a problem limited to the military, but it's everything that's up there.
Thank you very much for your time and the open conversation. It's always good to talk with people who are paid to worry about the things the rest of us would rather not.
Well, one final remark is, if someone ever claims they've finished and implemented all the cybersecurity, it's nonsense. It's a continually evolving problem.
Yeah, I think with like many of evolving technologies that we see at the moment. Thank you again, and it was a great pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you.
With that, SpaceWatch out. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.